Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. My next guest is Matt Rubright, the Chief Customer Officer at Jam.dev. Jam is a platform trusted by over 200,000 people and 32 of the Fortune 100 to fix software bugs fast. Whether you're internally testing your product or helping a customer troubleshoot an issue, Jam automatically collects all the technical context that your engineers will need to move fast. Jam powers the complete software development lifecycle with AI that eliminates 84% of bug reproduction tasks, so your engineers can ship clean code faster. With Jam, anyone can send deeply technical context instantly, so you can go from testing to production more efficiently and save an average of 11.9 hours per issue. See how much you can save at jamcalculator.com. You don't want to miss this episode with Matt. We're talking about AI and customer service, about how engineering teams and customer service can collaborate more efficiently, and we're talking about the future of customer experience. Please enjoy Matt Rubright. Matt, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. It's so good to see you today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We have a lot in common. We both have little kids. We're both very interested in customer experience and technology. First, let's just start off. Tell us about your kids.
Yeah, I was going to say the funny part about this job, both living on our own sides of the screen, is you are surrounded by life in my current office out of frame. So definitely, it's a wild ride. I work at a startup and expect chaos, but 4 and 2 year olds are a different brand of it. So very blessed, but yeah, it's chaos.
Yeah, you kind of have to embrace the chaos as a young business person because it just doesn't stop. And it's such a blessing to be surrounded by kids and chaos. You have to look at it like this is such a blessing. But let's talk about why you're here. You're here on the show to talk about what you're up to over at Jam. You are the chief customer officer. But interestingly enough, you've been in tech for a really long time and we have crossed paths with some of the same people. So let's just hear a little bit about how you got to this role at Jam and your background.
Yeah, happy to. It's interesting. My career is maybe in retrospect has a straighter line, but at the time, kind of going through the last 15 years, has really just had one kind of common theme to it. It's always been just working directly with customers. I spent the first 6 years of my professional career in consulting. And I had this weird experience where I was the only undergrad hired at this firm here based out of Seattle and was on kind of like a tip of spear team. So I would go out and be one of the first 2 or 3 people from the company out on client site trying to solve a problem, but ultimately trying to grow the footprint. And so it was this really formative experience, just being directly with customers from day one, but also kind of picking your head up and trying to understand what's happening at this company. What problems are they trying to solve? How do we like go seek out problems that we might be able to help with? So part sales, part operations, part customer experience is just something I've carried with me through the next, 13 years or so of working with customers and trying to now build companies.
So today we're going to be talking a lot about AI and customer experience. And I feel like customer experience as a category is facing this, I don't know if the word is bellwether moment, but it's certainly like all eyes on customer service because AI seems to have really opened the doors for all kinds of innovation. So, from your perspective, what are the most exciting opportunities for AI and customer service?
Yeah, I think the backdrop can't be ignored. What's happening in the industry is, at least from my vantage point, there was this decade plus of like customer acquisition was all people cared about, right? You could spend a lot of money, go acquire customers, grow really fast. And as the last few years have unfolded, that story has really shifted to like smart growth and how do you maintain customers? How do you retain them? They now have more choice than ever. It's easier than ever to switch between products and softwares. It's easier to evaluate those things. And so I think there's this kind of larger trend where we're shifting from really a big focus on this like customer acquisition to like, wow, we really need to prioritize and focus on how we make our customers happy and retain them. And with that has come this more intense focus on customer experience. Then you drop AI into this conversation, and it's changed the way that we can show up for our customers. It's changed who at a company can actually interact with customers. All these kind of like different changes that orgs are now figuring out, like, what is our role here? How do we show up together for the customer? Is engineering more involved or customer experience teams changing? And so there's just a lot of movement here that I don't think we all have a perfect answer to yet, but are in the midst of figuring out.
So many industries are right in the middle of a transformation and they might not even realize it. And one of them is customer service, one of them is IT. From what I understand, Jam, the product that you work on, the company you work for, really sits in the middle of those two things. So, talk about what Jam does and how you help customers.
It's such a fun problem to work on. We essentially started as an easier way to report bugs. So if you've ever had the experience of, clicking on a button that doesn't work and trying to report it to a team member, or maybe you're a customer and you're reporting it to the company, most people say, "Hey, this button doesn't work, go fix it." But for the teams that actually have to figure out how to solve this problem, there's so much more technical detail that's needed in order to go investigate and even really start on the problem. And it creates this interesting dynamic between teams, between support and engineering, where things have to be translated into more of like a technical knowledge, a technical context in order to get started. And so that's the problem that we focus on and have been for the last 5 years. What's really challenging and unique in this moment is support teams have more tools at their disposal to take those investigations further, to not have to be an engineer to solve more of the problem. And so, as they're kind of going through this moment of access to tools that allow them to do more, it's causing a bit of this kind of reckoning of what does customer support look like? How do we truly solve customer problems? How do we take investigations further? And we can go through a handful of examples of how that's happening, but maybe starting with the end in mind. I've talked to support leaders who've given their teams licenses to tools like Cursor, for example, and they're taking in these issues and connecting to their code base and trying to actually investigate, like, what is causing the issue, and actually writing tickets that have the solution in mind to go be implemented. So it's really changing the way that support teams interact with product, interact with engineers, interact with their customers. And AI is kind of in the front door to that, and Jam plays a role in that story.
It seems like in the past, I really think of this metaphor of doctors. Like in a hospital, the doctors, they're the cool people. They get the most respect. They're like these gods inside of the healthcare system. I only know this because my dad's a doctor. So I have a lot of experience with doctors because I know a lot of doctors. But inside the company, you could say that IT is sort of like that. Like customer service in the past was sort of dependent on IT and had to translate and find ways to communicate things that have gone wrong or broken. And now it seems like what you're building is just a more seamless way for these two groups to communicate. So IT doesn't feel like these out of touch doctors that aren't available, but are really like in line with customer service, and things just are moving more quickly and efficiently with a better culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you talk to a support leader, um, a lot of their lived experience on their teams, they're the ones out there talking to people about the issues, and they have a pretty good pulse of what's happening. And for a long time, their job was not only to solve those issues, but then to kind of get out their megaphone and try and influence within an organization changes that might help solve that permanently. And that can cause all sorts of stress within an org, right? The relationship, I think I've heard termed more of like a handoff in a lot of cases of like, we've gathered this information, let's hand it to engineers to go solve it. And so I think this moment is a unique one for support because of the tools that they have, that they can solve more of the problems that face customers. The most readily available example is like, hey, if we have a really updated knowledge base on our product and documentation, we can actually use AI to solve more customer problems. And that allows our team to just focus on the hardest ones. A tool like Jam is used to gather all the technical context. And with that, you can now plug it into tools like Cursor or Cloud Code or something else to investigate it further. And so I think as an industry, you're seeing a group that has like had this intense knowledge of what customers go through now have these tools that allow them to take action and resolve more of those things than ever before. That's going to come with a lot of change in the way that their internal relationships and partnerships work, but it's also going to change the way they interact with customers. And we're just kind of at the beginning of that shift in the way that teams work together internally around this problem.
So I was listening to a podcast with your founders, and one of the things they were talking about was the fact that bug reporting has not changed since the 90s. And so many teams still report bugs like in a single text file. And like, why has bug reporting not changed since the 90s? And what's different now?
Yeah. Um, so one thing that hasn't changed and probably will never change is customers when they have to reach out to you to say, hey, there's something going wrong, they're not really motivated or wanting to spend a lot of extra effort to help you help them, right? They're saying like, hey, something on your end is broken, help me. And what's been really challenging about bug reporting for customers is like they actually the teams need more information in order to take action, and that does require a lot of Q&A of like, what type of device are you on? Can you show me, like, if you're on the web, can you inspect your browser and show me this code that you've never heard of? Can you walk me through the steps that got you there? Can you try and change these permissions, right? There are all these like context clues that you'll probably get asked by a support team just to be able to pass along a ticket and say, hey, I think these are the conditions under which this issue happened. And so we haven't really had a way to gather that without a lot of Q&A. And so what ends up happening is, support does their duty to go ask these questions. They put the customer through that Q&A. They go back to engineering and maybe they have more questions. And now they're kind of in this back and forth between customers and engineering in order to say like, hey, we need this information. And so ultimately the customer experience isn't a great one. What Jam has built is a way to gather that context without asking. And so for a customer, it's a simple screen recording, but it's gathering all the technical context from their browser in the background so that engineers immediately have what they need. Ultimately, it's a better customer experience because they don't have to think about it, but it allows these teams who have kind of had this hand-to-hand process of like, how do we work together to avoid a lot of that miscommunication or lack of information that can bubble up in some unfortunate ways. So that's really where we focus. But yeah, gathering the information has always been kind of the major blocker in this experience.
With AI, from what I hear from the CXOs that I talk to, it seems like there's this shift now where companies can actually really be proactive and do the heavy lifting and the digging around for the customer so they actually know what's wrong, whether that's an internal customer or an external customer. And that's the beauty of AI. Let's switch gears and talk about team structures. All this technology has huge implications for org charts and team structures, roles, workflows, staffing models. What are you seeing with how these technologies are impacting team structures?
Good question. I think of a really simple parallel of like you talk to a support leader and they say, hey, you have to have good data to feed into this AI, right? It can't help solve customer problems if we don't give it good data. And I think the same thing is true for AI tools when it comes to org structure and team structure. If a support team and engineering team don't have a collaborative relationship with a lot of this kind of base built in, layering on AI tools to try and help them work together often doesn't work. It can add a lot of chaos to the equation. And so where I'm seeing a lot of our customers focus is first at the leadership level of like, what is our cadence for communicating what we're working on, what we're experimenting with, what results we're seeing, and then how do we create a context for both engineers and support teams to work together in a more collaborative and experimental way. I was chatting with a support leader the other day who has this carved out little team of support reps who have cursor and are trying to solve the bugs and actually like write pull requests so they can actually like code, and they're partnered with a couple engineers, and it's this total aside project that like they're rapidly learning together in this small group that in success maybe they can roll out to the broader team. And so it's a roundabout way of getting back to like there has to be this relationship between these teams that gives space for working together more closely, for experimentation together, and like the willingness to not have that succeed all the time, to find the right things within the world of like AI tools that will apply for them. So that would be the starting point. The other, I think, has always been true, which is just teams that work separately will be more transactional. But if you have, support leads who are joining engineering stand-ups or engineers who are joining support calls, those kind of overlaps and moments um, kind of humanize the experience and bring them closer together.
Well, humanizing the customer experience is such an important piece of a customer experience strategy. I think with this technology, there's a lot of bad behavior where now with chatbots, I mean, we've all had a chatbot that really doesn't work, that is basically a waste of time, which is the worst experience in contrast to an AI like a Sephora that is actually using AI in an interesting way, like how they combine conversational commerce and conversational feedback. And basically, it's a survey that's a chatbot conversational and it's very effective. Let's talk about back to customer facing teams, and let's talk about the fact that customer service and front facing customer facing roles are often the canary in the coal mine. They're the first to notice when there might be a major problem, red flag, something going wrong, or an opportunity. Talk about how Jam really helps to accelerate that process of feedback and improving customer experience in real time.
Yeah, a very good point. I think not only in bugs, but just overall in customer experience, you have the team that is hearing it every day. And historically, they've then tried to back up to say, well, where are the data points that I can then take in hand with this anecdote to my counterparts and say, hey, this is a real thing we need to pay attention to. Historically, that's taken a lot of effort and time that like frontline teams may have not been afforded, right? They're the ones actually handling this day to day and have to be available to customers. And so that was always kind of a constraint to deal with. Um, what's unique about what we have today is one, we can analyze conversations a lot better using AI. And so you can start to see patterns and sentiment and how customers are feeling, topics that they might care about. And with Jam incorporated in that, you can start to see the immediate context of the issue. And so you can imagine customer comes in with a particular issue, you record it on their screen, you get all the logs that come with it. An engineer can pretty quickly say, oh, I see the pattern here, and this is actually going to affect many more customers than maybe I initially thought. And so kind of the immediacy of clarity allows you to then say, what's the scope of impact? How should we prioritize that? What is interesting though, and I hear this a lot in working with support leaders, is it's not typically the big tickets and issues that are the problem and the cause of stress, right? Like sometimes issue comes in and you're like, wow, this is a impact across our customer base. And engineering teams like are really quick to move fast on those things. The challenges are the ones that are kind of the in between, that you're not quite sure what the issue is, that's hard to reproduce. You're not sure how many customers it may impact. And then it turns into this dynamic where it's basically how loud do you want to advocate for it? And so you get support teams who on the ground know the experience and feel like this is a real painful thing for our customer and have to choose, is this does this need to be escalated? Like it turns into more of a social dynamic. And so I think where Jam really helps is in those in between issues where it's not immediately clear the scope of impact, and we can get to that in an objective way that doesn't require teams to kind of shout from the rooftops to say, hey, this is something we should all take a deeper look at.
So you are a chief customer officer. We have chief customer officers that watch this show. What's something you've learned in your time at Jam about working with customers that you think every chief customer officer should think about?
One external facing, one internal facing. I think the first is just the level of paranoia you bring into customer conversations about, is something really working the way that you think it is, and the way that they're telling you it is. We're a startup, so the scope of things, we have a few core products where other chief customer officers may have a wider bandwidth, but the same has always been true in my experience. Customers will often tell you things are good when they are not. It is easier, it's less conflict, maybe something isn't perceived as a big enough issue. But if you come in with like a healthy paranoia to those conversations of what could be better, what could be fixed, and you make it clear in the way that you show up to conversations that like, no ego here, we want to make this better. Nothing's too small. I think you start to hear customers open up more in a way that's really productive for your team. And so that's something I try and bring to calls. That's something I try and demonstrate for our team so that they do it as well when they talk to customers. That would be maybe my customer facing advice. In terms of teams, I think advocating for the customer and being very real about what their context is. Often an engineer or some other team member hears about a specific issue a customer is facing, and that's their worldview of what's happening for that customer. But in reality, you get on a customer call, and there are probably 4 or 5 things you're actively working on for that customer that live outside of the specific issue you pulled someone in for. And the best customer experience is when everyone who's there to serve it has the full context of the relationship and what that customer needs. And so I would say internally, like, we need to create systems that allow us to share that context. We need to train people on that context, and we need to be vocal in what that context is so team members can show up in the right way for customers.
What do you think the future of bug reporting will look like? Will it be much easier for your clients to understand what's happening with the customer in real time?
Yeah, I think the first iteration of Jam was like, how do we make it really easy for someone to click a button and it's done? I think what you're going to see, and we truly believe, is that um, customer support really lives wherever the customer is experiencing your product and brand. And so being able to communicate with them wherever that may be, whether it's in product or on social or somewhere else, to immediately understand their issue and resolve it, bringing that to the forefront is something we truly believe in. You'll see more of Jam kind of do that in the product. But then the second half of this has to be proactive. Something you said earlier, we have better monitoring in place to proactively know like something might be going wrong for this customer, and that might mean we reach out, we surface that issue to them to ask about it, to make sure that there's nothing that's quietly not being reported because it feels like a lot of effort, or maybe we're proactively solving it without ever having to ask them. And so I think the future of bug reporting is really just an intense focus on all the ways you can observe what's happening for a customer and finding ways to take more and more of that workload off of their plate.
Yeah, what you do is so big now with so many interactions being on mobile, on devices, and with so much change in AI. It's actually this kind of overlooked huge opportunity that I think is really exciting. So congrats on all your success, and I know you guys will just continue to take the industry by storm.
Thank you. Yeah, the last plug I'll give is we're actually going to be in OpenAI's inaugural app directory. I think there are 12 apps that are going to be announced here in the next few days. So by the time this podcast comes out, but as we think about how AI impacts customer support and experience, um, better connection between AI tools and Jam and customers is something we're super excited about.
That's amazing. And good for you for doing this incredible job. And you have little kids. So you're amazing. You're like Superman. And we need to get to know you a bit better now by doing rapid fire. Does that sound fun?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. Matt, what's the most important part of your morning routine?
Breakfast with my kids.
What do you do to relax at the end of a hectic day?
Pizza.
Cool. What show are you currently streaming?
Um, I am in it. You'll appreciate this as someone who has kids. By the time you finish work and you get your kids down and you've had this hectic day, sometimes you just want to turn your brain off in a way and watch something very silly. And so my wife and I have been revisiting some of these silly classics of like Parks and Recreation and Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
Yeah,
and just shows we've seen too many times that we already know all the words to, but make us laugh.
love it. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Um, Working on things that feel impactful, not just in work, but with my kids and my family, feeling purpose in that. and then just, yeah, watching my kids grow.
What's your favorite type of vacation?
Used to be in my 20s exploring with a backpack. I would say these days, a little bit slower pace, something that's disconnected from my phone and from work, and just focusing on being in the moment, being present with my family.
If you could have lunch with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, on the theme of television, someone I heard an interview with recently that I think would just be a fascinating person to learn from is Mike Schur. He's
Mhm,
the writer of a lot of The Office, Parks and Rec, all these shows, and he has like a pretty interesting vantage point on people
mhm.
and how people work together. So I would love to ask him some questions.
Nice. No one's ever said that one. I like it. And lastly, if you had to describe your outlook in one quick motto, what would it be?
Mystic.
I like it. I'm hearing that more and more, and I like that one. Matt,
Cool.
Matt, if people want to learn more about you or Jam, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, very simple. Jam.dev. Come check us out. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Matt Rubright, and always happy to chat about bugs and customer experience. And yeah, would love to chat.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show with me, Matt. It's really been a pleasure. Everybody, you've been tuning in to the Modern Customer Podcast. Head over to jam.dev to learn more, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like or subscribe and follow my social content on other platforms where I post content daily, including X, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and more.